Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. To be notified of when I go live, you can subscribe to text notifications. It's free. So you can text the words Dana Live, but all one word, to the number 22999. And if you're interested in some words of encouragement, you can subscribe to that as well by texting the words I thrive, all one word, to the same number, 22999. So, with that said, let's just jump into it. So let's see, UNA is here, Butterfly is here, Tammy is here. Welcome, welcome. How is everybody doing? How's your week? Anything new and exciting going on? So, let's see. This chat is doing some weird things tonight. So we'll just see how that goes. I started the book club for this month. The book this month is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a fantastic book, short book. If you're going to listen to it, it's about a little over 2 hours. It's a short book, but it's really packed full of some fantastic points, and I'm really excited to discuss it. So if you're interested in book club, that'll be the last Thursday of this month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Oh, good. I'm so glad UNA says, hey guys, the words of encouragement are great. Well, thank you. I'm so glad you enjoy it. I really enjoy putting them together. Um, I don't know if she's here tonight, but there's a gal on here who goes by the name Dandelion Greens, and she helps tremendously with that. And I think we both really, really enjoy it. It's gives you warm, fuzzy feelings coming up with quotes and um, just kind of knowing you're going to hopefully put a smile on somebody's face when those messages go out. Thank you, Jack. Was it you that emailed me about that? Somebody emailed me about book club live stream playlists. Pam is here. Hello, hello. Margarita says body flashbacks. They are exhausting. Yes, absolutely. What do you find anything helps with that when you have those? Okay, so it was you, Jack, who emailed me. I saved I thought I had your phone number in there saved under your name, but it just showed the phone number. So that's strange. I'll have to go in and check. I'm still figuring that service out. So we all know how I am with technology. So who knows how long that'll take for me to get it figured out, but I am on it. Embers is here, says, "Hey y'all." And Pam says, "What are body flashbacks?" Let's see. Margarita, would you kind of like to explain what body flashbacks are and how you are experiencing them? If not, um, if not, I can. Well, I guess I don't want to put you on the spot. I'll go ahead and explain a little bit, and then you chime in because everybody's experience with flashbacks in general are different. But uh, well, flashbacks in general tend to be this kind of tend to go hand in hand with emotional flooding. So it's like every part of you remembers, and they can come on and often do come on suddenly without warning. And sometimes for even just the strangest things, it might be a smell, it might be the sound of somebody's voice, a song on the radio, your own thoughts, just kind of drifting and then remembering, you name it. And some people experience um, just kind of the emotions, the different sensations throughout their whole body. So it's not just uncomfortable thoughts, it can be inflammation, it can be pain, it can be clenching your muscles, um, it, and just all of the different kind of like somatic responses. It can lead to trouble sleeping, trouble kind of functioning. Um, yeah, you name it. She says, feeling extremely unsafe. That's a great example. She says trembling, feeling extremely unsafe. So it sounds like, Margarita, what you're experiencing is that feeling of uh of fear throughout your body. Probably similar to like an anxiety or a panic attack, but it's with fear. And my goodness, yeah, that does sound very traumatic. Is there anything that you do that helps when you're feeling that way? Great point. Critical mass says, yeah, the trigger can be so subtle that your conscious mind might not even be aware of what caused it. Yes, absolutely. And then that is just strange, right? So we might even be having a great time or sound asleep, and then all of a sudden it's just kind of like this amygdala hijack that goes on, and we feel absolutely terrified or incredibly anxious for seemingly no reason. The book, there's several authors and what's the word I'm looking for? Like speakers, experts, I guess you could say, in this field. Uh, Bessel van der Kolk, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk is one of them. He wrote the very popular book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is fascinating. And you have Peter Levine, who wrote Waking the Tiger and a couple of other books on trauma. He actually, I just found out the other day, he offers a class that I'm hoping to attend whenever the next one is offered. It's on somatic processing or somatic experiencing. And um, I forget how long, it's pretty intense. So I'm really excited to go through that, and I'll share with you guys what I learn from that. Michelle says, yeah, I got a lot out of that book. It was like a textbook for me. Yeah. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Nicole's World of Books says, yes, the guy that abused me, I always feel sick to my stomach, like I got off a roller coaster ride that I hated. I blocked him on everything because every time I see a picture of him, it triggers me. Yeah, and frankly, I think a lot of that's normal. Whenever we experience something so incredibly painful, it's a natural response to want to avoid it. And that's our body's way of trying to keep us safe. Um, in time, those feelings tend to lessen and kind of calm down. But one of the things that helped me with those feelings, and you guys chime in if you have any suggestions for this as well, uh, was was doing a lot of like affirmations and um, kind of reminding myself that there's nothing there for me, of that I didn't lose out on anything, that this relationship was just, it was pure poison, and it took me a long, it took me a while to see it, but it that's what it was. And so I guess kind of reminding myself, for those that are struggling, I think with feelings of like nostalgia or sadness or kind of the what ifs, that can help, reminding yourself there's nothing there for me. Um, and then also, I think making the declaration of that you're going to use everything that happens to you for your highest and greatest good. That this that this person didn't destroy you. They might have caused an explosion in your life, but that you're not going to give them the power to actually destroy you. That kind of helped. That helped me. For a while, I didn't know how I felt or kind of what was going to become of me. I had so much anger and I had so much hurt, and I'd never experienced those feelings to that level before. And I was very dysregulated. Um, and I've mentioned this before, but it was kind of like my 4-step mindset process. The first one was making the declaration of, I'm not going to let this person or this situation end my life. So suicide off the table, because my mind was going, I mean, at that time, everything was an option. I was so overwhelmed and just um, feeling very chaotic, and my actions, I was just very unpredictable and unstable. So realizing I'm not going to let this person or situation end my life. And then the second one was, I'm not going to let this person or situation ruin my life. And that was a harder one to declare, because it kind of felt like my life was ruined. But then realizing, no, this is just a chapter in my life. This doesn't have to be my whole life. That helped tremendously to kind of realize, okay, there's a beginning and then there's an end to this. This doesn't have to go on and on and on for decades. Like, I can make some decisions. Now that this manipulationship has ended, I can do some things differently. I can, um, there's things that I can do to move in a positive direction. And so then the third declaration I made to myself was that I was going to take everything that had happened to me and everything in life, and I was going to use it for my highest and greatest good. And that was difficult too, although that wasn't as difficult as that this won't ruin my life kind of a thing. But realizing, okay, you know what? Any pain that comes my way, I'm going to squeeze out as many lessons as I possibly can from it. That helped a lot, because then I was getting something out of it. Even if there was a lot of pain, it wasn't something I had to internalize, and it didn't have to be a complete loss. Like, there was still a lesson in that. And then the fourth one was that in time, that I was going to use my pain and use what had happened to me for the highest and greatest good of others. And that really helped to give my pain a purpose and a direction. And this doesn't have, I mean, you don't have to do this on a big scale. You don't have to start a YouTube channel or whatever, but um, even just kind of spreading awareness or spreading some love in the world, it helps. It helps give all of that energy a direction, a positive direction in which to flow. And it it helps tremendously. So, okay, hold on a second here. I just saw we had oh gosh, I we had a live stream donation, which I appreciate tremendously. And I thought I would get to it in time, and now it has disappeared. So, oh gosh, I guess whoever posted that, shoot, if you had a question, could you post it in the chat? And moderators, could you let me know? Berlinda. Okay, Berlinda's the one that sent the super chat. Okay, Jack is on it. Thank you, Jack. Okay, let me see here. Okay, I'm going to wait to see if we can find that question again. Um, oh, I like that. Kate says, whenever I think of bad past events with a narcissist, I make a crumbling motion in my hand and then toss it over my shoulder. That action helps me to stop ruminating in the moment. I like that. Yeah, I'm a big fan of visualization. That I think is really powerful. So doing things like that, or sometimes envisioning pain or anxiety, getting very clear with it. Okay, what does it look like? What color is it? How big is it? What is the texture of it? Kind of putting a face to it, or not necessarily a face, but giving it a shape, kind of defining its parameters it can be tremendously helpful. And then, so like for example, the body, um, the feeling of like body flashbacks and more of like that somatic experience. There's this exercise, it's called a container exercise, where you visualize a container. Um, Everybody does this a little bit differently. So it's whatever works for you. It can be as big as you want, as small as you want. It can be a mason jar. It could be a box. It can be, you name it. And, but you want it to be big enough that whatever you're putting in there, um, like that you're content with whatever you're putting in there, staying in there. And so before you go to sleep at night, especially before you go to sleep at night, thinking about things that are kind of stirring up inside of you and visualizing putting them in that container. And but that only you can open it. And so you have that power so that they stay in there until you decide to open it and pull them out and address it if you so choose. So I think that can be powerful, just kind of doing that exercise in particular. Um, oh boy, Catalzi. I know I did not say that correct. I apologize. Says therapy never worked for me. I just finally figured it out on my own. Yeah, I think the challenge with therapy is uh, it tends to be more of it. Therapy is more about identifying and exploring feelings, and then processing them, which is fantastic. And it definitely has its time and place. But I think to really move forward and heal from this, there really needs to be what's known as like a psychoeducational component. So it's um, just kind of the education behind all of that. That helps tremendously to make sense of everything. So yeah, kind of getting that understanding, and then identifying emotions, and then working through them, processing them. It's a kind of a 1-2 combination that needs to happen. It's just been my experience personally and professionally, and seeing all the people in the support group. I think the combination of those two things in particular is what's absolutely necessary for a person to move forward and heal. And when I say heal, I don't mean just no longer feel emotionally devastated, or no longer feel suicidal, or no longer thinking about their ex. I mean, repairing their self esteem, um, examining boundaries, kind of making their life, creating a life that they love. And just examining a lot of kind of disempowering core beliefs that we might have had before this relationship, but that odds are we definitely picked up during this relationship. uh, Working to replace those with something that's more empowering. um, Lots of different shifts with self-esteem, and yeah, there's just a lot to it. But it's a difficult journey, but it's definitely one that's worth it. Okay, thank you, Berlinda. I see the chat now. She says, I'm struggling to get to know myself again. 70 days, no contact. Any advice, please? Sure. Well, I guess could you elaborate in terms of struggling to get to know yourself again? Um, I guess could you elaborate on that? What exactly do you mean by getting to know yourself again? So I'm gonna, or maybe let me put it this way: what would knowing yourself look like? For like, if a person knew themselves, what would they know? I guess. Um, let me see. Ember says, I have a crazy huge bone growth in my mouth from a lifetime of abuse, aka clenching my jaw, grinding and TMJ. I'm so happy to have moved away from them and to start healing. Yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm happy for you. Because man, that's no joke. That clenching the jaw thing, it can really cause all kinds of issues. Laura says to Belinda, one day at a time, one moment at a time. I make lists of things to do and set up prompters. Also, get to know what you like: movies, music, food, interests, and pamper yourself. Yes, those are all fantastic, fantastic suggestions. One of the exercises uh, that helped me, that I think it's just kind of a fun thing to do anyhow, even if you've never experienced like anything like this. I just, it's interesting. It's kind of an interesting little science experiment to do on yourself, is um, to think about things in your life, everything. So stuff and relationships and kind of everything in between, on a scale ranging from 0 to 10. 10 being, oh man, that absolutely juices me. I just, yes, that's the zone. I love it so much. 5 is lukewarm. Meh. 0 is no, ice cold. And to start in an area of, to start with things that you're not emotionally invested in. So, for example, some people, myself included, uh, struggle with this. Like, I wouldn't want to start in my closet. For example, I have a, weight gain, weight loss. My whole closet is several therapy sessions worth of stuff. So not a good place for me to start, but maybe like the kitchen cabinet is as a lot more emotionally neutral for me. That might not be the case for you if you have, let's say, dishes that have been passed down from the generations that, there's this emotional investment on. So whatever area of your house that you feel kind of emotionally neutral about, start there and kind of get a baseline for what does a 0 feel like, what does a 5 feel like, and what does a 10 feel like, and exploring that. You can start doing that. You can do that with TV shows or movies or music or um, anything and everything. The color of the paint on your wall, the kind of car you drive, the um, you can flip through a magazine, or you could just go on Pinterest even, or Google Images, and just kind of scroll through and look at different things and think about, okay, um, yeah, kind of what's for you, what's not for you, and why. The It's interesting enough. This exercise I think is powerful enough without even asking the why. It gets you very in tune with, oh my gosh, I have a lot of things in my life that are like a 5 or somehow less than a 7. And why is that? And what's that about? Is it can be very eye-opening. But then to add to the why part of it, well, why do I have this thing in my life or this relationship or whatever it might be? That's a 5 or a 7. Was it obligation? Was it just somehow I inherited it? Was it fear? If you're working at a job that feels like a 4, okay, well, that's pretty miserable. So, kind of why? Why are you working there? Well, maybe it's out of necessity. Maybe it's fear that you won't get a different job. Um, Maybe because it's close to the house. I don't know. There's all kinds of different reasons that can be unpacked, but that can be a really great way to start getting your bearings about what you like and what you dislike, because the way that that translates is those things that are really like a 9 or a 10. That's the stuff that nourishes you, and the stuff that's really like below a 5 is the stuff that drains you. And So kind of getting clear on, okay, this is what nourishes me, doing more of that. Hobbies, um, all of that, and trying to bring awareness of when you find yourself maybe kind of defaulting into doing things that are less than a 9, or kind of um, and you'll know too when something is not for you, in large part based on how you feel. So if you let's see, here's an example of my own life. So when I was doing this exercise like 7 years ago, okay, I like I had this freak out moment, and I threw out all of my clothes onto my bed, cleaned out my closet, put them all in my bed, and realized I had all of these like button down, very stiff shirts, totally not my style. And they don't fit right because that's just not, it's does not fit for my body. And uh, I fought with them all the time. I was always itching. I don't like collars. It was miserable. And I realized, okay, well, the reason I have these shirts is this is how I feel that this is what it means to look professional. This is how I should dress. And so then realizing, no, I don't have to do that at all. I can wear something else and be fine, be presentable to go to work. Um, so yeah, kind of getting clear on what are the shoulds that are driving your behavior, and um, yeah, just kind of what juices you, doing more of that. Oh, and I was gonna say what you feel. So I was miserable. I was frustrated. I was irritable. Uh, I was just uncomfortable on a regular basis every time I wore one of those shirts. In a relationship, the feeling might be somewhat similar. So if you're leaving let's say you have a friend in your life, and pretty much every single time you leave their presence or you get off the phone or whatever it might be, you find yourself really irritated. Then, okay, what's the number? Maybe this friendship is more of like a 5. Maybe it used to be an 8 or a 9, but they've changed, you've changed, or maybe you were lying to yourself, or maybe it was a an 8 or a 9 because you were really lonely and didn't have anybody else in your life, you know. And yeah, or you thought it was more nourishing than it was, but now the more you're learning about kind of boundaries and effective communication and all of these things, you realize, you know what, gosh, no, this friendship is just it brings me nothing but frustration. And this isn't working for me. This is more of like a 3 or a 4. Then okay, then that's a sign to do something different. So if we're feeling, it's very helpful to link up our emotions, kind of emotions to situations, and to realize that there oftentimes is very direct connection between situations and feelings. So, if you are leaving a job and you're crying, you're having anxiety dreams, you're frustrated, you're starting to see a therapist because you hate your job so much, um, or you hate your boss or whatever it is, then it's time to start kind of reevaluating and to see about what can you do differently. What do you have control over? What do you not have control over? Let's see. Let me scroll here. Embers is saying, changing my life. And Michelle, wow, that's so neat. I didn't know y'all write. I am writing a book for post traumatic growth using expressive arts therapy. I'm looking for a writing buddy to swap edits. That's very cool. I love it. Oh, I love that too. Michelle says, if we have a like a teleport party, we need to invite Embers to lead a healing dance party. Nothing too strenuous, just pattern interrupts, and invite all of the chat folks. I love it. Yes, that would be fantastic. Oh, I love that too. Changing My Life says, okay, um, she has a writing coach And she says, and the writing coach says to take the time to ask the story what it wants to say. It works speaking to your story and personifying it. That's a fantastic writing tip. I love that. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Joni says, when does the desire for the abuser go away? I know what he is. I now know what he's doing. So why do I still desire him? It might, well, I think in part, it takes a little while for our heart to catch up with our head. And feelings don't just stop all of a sudden. So, or feelings that are sincere, I should say, don't just stop all of a sudden. So it's normal if you've had this deep emotional investment in a person for a long time and the relationship's over, that your heart is gonna need some healing. With that said, I think it can be helpful to reframe your understanding of the situation. So my guess is that it's more along the lines of that you miss the man that you thought he was, or you miss the man that you hoped he could be. You miss the relationship that you thought you had, or you missed a relationship that you hoped could be. And kind of looking at it through that lens, it's like, oh, well, that tends to make a lot of sense. Like in my situation, um, everything turned out to be a total lie. And I really struggled with, man, I missed what I thought we had. And that was when I realized I don't miss him. I missed what I thought I had. And so continuing to kind of rephrase that to yourself to get clear can help kind of link up your heart and your head of, okay, it's not so much him that I miss, it's um, maybe it's the man that you thought he was or that you thought he could be. It might have even been some of the good times together. It could have been that sense of companionship or some of the fun things that you did together. But those kinds of things, uh, can be found in other people through friends and through different activities. Getting out there, I think, in cultivating hobbies, cultivating friendships, not getting out there in terms of dating, but getting out there in terms of expanding our kind of social circles and hobbies and these kinds of things can really help with that. For a lot of people after an abusive relationship, their circle has shrunk tremendously. And a lot of why they're missing that abuser so much is because that abuser was like the primary person in their life, if not the only person in their life. And, I've used this analogy before, but it's, uh, it's very difficult to let go of something, even if we know it's not good for us, if it's all we have. It's kind of like having a fridge full of rotten food. And if you don't know when you're going to go grocery shopping, it can be kind of difficult to throw everything out that's spoiled. We can still kind of try to, oh, well, I can somehow still kind of make this work. And the reality is, no, there's nothing there. It's all rotten. And it's the same thing with relationships. So, um, kind of pouring that energy into something that has a return for you can be tremendously helpful. Okay, let me see. Let me scroll up here. Embers says, hey, Dana. Okay, I'm so happy to finally be rid of the night terrors and nightmares of my violent ex. But now when I dream of him, he is saccharine sweet. Why is that? Well, I'm not sure. My initial thought about it is saccharin sweet is something that's not real, right? So saccharin is an artificial sweetener. So if a person is saccharin sweet, it's insincerity, which is just another form of manipulation. So maybe your brain is kind of now at the point of working through kind of seeing a lot of like the charm and the insincerity in terms of the quote unquote good times or when he was being nice, realizing, oh, there was a lot of that was incredibly manipulative and insincere as well. Just a thought. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Yeah, good point, Rick. He says, yeah, antifreeze is sweet, but it's also poison. Yep. And Lindsay asks, well, how do you meet people for hobbies and socializing? How do you do all of that with COVID? The website meetup.com is fantastic. I know, things have changed just because of COVID, but I think there's quite a few groups out there that are having online meetups. So, like a group Zoom chat, those kinds of things. So that's an option. Um, Joining some different Facebook groups based around hobbies and seeing if they do any type of yeah, like a group live stream or anything like that. Let's see. Okay. Scrolling. People are talking about Jeff Goldblum in the chat. It's had, yeah, lots of conversations going on here. It's funny. Uh, yes, and BB mentions you have to grieve those feelings, and grief is a process. Yes, absolutely. And yep, and grief takes time. For I don't even. I think when people are fresh out of abuse, probably at least depending on the situation, depending on the person, there's so much shock and anger and hurt that it just can feel so incredibly overwhelming. And those emotions can be so overwhelming that I almost feel like at first it's because when a person's like in crisis like that, it's to kind of help get them out of crisis. And then when things start, um, once they're out of crisis, I should say, then kind of a more formalized process of grieving, of kind of sitting with the emotions and exploring them and all of that. And grief is it's a lot like waves. At first, I think it was Pete Walker who talked about that. Like at first, the waves are really high, and it feels like you're out in the middle of the ocean at night, and it's terrifying, and you feel like these waves are going to sink you. And then over time, you kind of hopefully can learn some different coping methods and um, reaching out for support and doing other things. Those waves that kind of become less intimidating and less volatile, and then to the point of you can start seeing the waves as they come, and they don't sink you, that you're able to kind of surf them. I thought that was a really good analogy with grief, because it is a process and it does take time, and those emotions are going to continue to surface. and just kind of realize this is part of being human. Like we all experience trauma. Nobody gets out of this life trauma free. Some people have a lot more trauma than others, but it's still just a part of being human. And unfortunately, trauma and processing trauma and understanding feelings and all of that, it's not something that's readily taught, or even talked about. It tends to be people's first experiences with trauma tends to be when they're in crisis. Um, you know, when a loved one is diagnosed with or they are diagnosed with a terminal illness, and then hospice comes in, or when they're in an abusive relationship, and now kind of next thing you know, they're in a support group, or they're in the hospital. These kinds of things, and that's really unfortunate, because it's important that we discuss that these topics are discussed and made. Um, and I wish they were more mainstream, because it's just as important as any other life skill, sex education, or um, understanding money, or you know like any other skill. It's a part of life. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll here. Embers was saying, yeah, saccharine equals fake. That resonates with me. Like when he exiled me from my home and business, saying, oh, sweetie, you can take these sheets, and honey, you take those towels, a month after his death threat. Yeah. Yeah. That sweetness, that insincerity, uh, uh, it's manipulative, and it can be just as scary as death threats, because you realize it's insincere, and you realize that you're not dealing with um, a person that's on the level. And if a person's not on the level, then our brain's picking up that they're not safe. Like we don't know what to make of them. Their behaviors are erratic, and it's not sincere. That's very unsettling. Monica says, yeah, I've been wanting to cry a lot lately, and I've been pushing it down with anger, and it's time to cry. Yeah. And that can be so therapeutic, to just allow yourself to have a good cry. If you're struggling with kind of crying, one of the things that can help is to watch a sad movie. Ideally something that doesn't have anything to do with relationships. So like watching, I don't know, like Old Yeller, or um, some type of sad movie like that. And it just kind of milks that emotion and gets those tears started. And then once it starts, then just kind of writing them out. It it helps tremendously, instead of kind of um, waiting until you feel like you're ready to cry. Because with trauma, there's a lot of emotional numbness too. So it's common for people to go between anger or numbness. And um, yeah, so it can kind of be a cathartic experience to kind of provoke that emotion, and and not wait until you feel like crying to cry. I agree completely. BB says a great amount of abuse recovery is grief. Yep. I'm with you 100% on that. We read a wonderful book by Pete Walker. It was called The Tao of Fully Feeling, sometime last year. And it was, a lot of it had to do with processing emotions and grief. And he has a process. It's fantastic. So part of the process that I remember is kind of assigning appropriate accountability. So in terms of abuse, um, um, kind of realizing that it's not 100% on you. that for those because some people still struggle with that, of feeling that they lost the best thing in their life, or that they somehow caused this, or that they should have done things differently, or um, there's kind of some victim blaming that's coming from themselves. So assigning appropriate accountability and realizing, no, I'm not going to own this. Like, this person had some really awful behavior. I didn't deserve it. I didn't cause it. And, it didn't start with me, and it's not going to end with me, unfortunately. And so realizing, okay, it takes two people to make a relationship work. And this person was absolutely horrific to me. No matter what I could have done, it it wouldn't have helped, because communication wasn't the issue here. Power and control was the issue. And um, he also talks about the process of angering, allowing ourselves to be angry, and not only to feel angry, but to emote, to get that emotion out, to act out of that emotion. So whatever that might, obviously in like a safe way, but whatever that might look like, yelling, screaming, um, maybe turning up some loud music, hitting a pillow, uh, just kind of getting it out, getting those feelings out is huge. Okay, let's see. Let me um oh, Magalodoro says that hello. He says, today is my birthday. I always get depressed on my birthdays. Does this have something to do with narcissistic abuse, or is it another issue? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. So my guess is because it's in particular like on your birthday that these feelings are more prominent. It it could have something to do with a past history of abuse, but it could also have um, just as much or more to do with maybe some beliefs you have surrounding your birthday. Birthdays and holidays can be very, very difficult for people that have experienced abuse, or even just pain from other people. It can be a time of kind of self-reflection. It can maybe be a reminder of it's a new, uh, it's a new year. So, but with that kind of comes this period of reflection of, oh, well, what did I do last year? Especially birthdays that end in a 5 or a 0. And kind of quite, there's a big time of introspection, I think, for a lot of people, especially around their birthday, of, well, yeah, kind of, where am I in life? I'm getting older. Uh, am I accomplishing things that I want to accomplish? Who do I have to celebrate this day with? So it can be very difficult. Let's see. Does any of that resonate with you, or kind of bring anything up? People are talking about different songs they have. I think that's a great idea. Creating like a playlist for experiencing emotion. Um, Movies and music, I think, are a really fantastic way of uh, evoking emotion. So there doesn't have to be kind of this intentionality coming from us of, okay, well, now it's time for me to get mad, right? Or now it's time for me to cry. It's sort of like, okay, I'm going to put on a sad song, or I'm going to put on I don't know, heavy metal or something, and just, um, you know, get it out, just something that's high energy, and go for a run, or something to just to provoke those emotions and ride that wave. Let's see. Gwen asked, Dana, can you see my question? I don't know. Let me scroll up and I will see if I can see it. Okay. She says, how do I break through to feeling angry about the things he's done? I journaled the negative things other people have said about him, and it rings true. I believe them, but not my experiences. Okay. Well, I guess I would ask what, um, I don't have context for this, but I guess what emotions surface when you're thinking back to these experiences, or how boundaries were crossed, or um, all of this? What's surfacing? Do you find yourself justifying his behavior? Do you find it yourself minimizing it? Um, I guess what's coming up with you? So I guess I would start there of focusing, okay, what emotions are surfacing for you? And then kind of exploring those. They're more likely than not, I think there tends to be some kind of limiting core beliefs that come up with emotions. Anger is a difficult emotion for a lot of people to experience. I think more so women than men. So, women tend to have trouble experiencing anger, whereas men have trouble experiencing sadness. A lot of that just has to do with how we're socialized. So, it's kind of an opposite approach. So for women, getting in tune with anger, um, um, it's a process. I guess writing things down, unpacking your beliefs around it. Do you have the belief of that it's not okay to be angry, or that you shouldn't be angry, or that you should forgive him, or that you should be compassionate? What other thoughts and feelings are surfacing for you when you think about all of the different ways? Okay, minimizing, she says. Okay. So, okay, then with that, um kind if you find yourself minimizing it, maybe, and I don't know if it's minimizing his behavior or minimizing your feelings surrounding it. So I'll just start with, let's say you're minimizing your feelings surrounding it. So a very common minimization is, oh, well, other people have it worse, right? Or it could have been worse, that kind of a thing. Countering that with, well, that might be, but that still doesn't make what he did somehow okay or not a problem. Just because somebody else might have a broken leg and you have a broken foot doesn't make your foot hurt any less. So that's, kind of, that's one way that we tend to minimize things. Um, I think giving yourself permission to get angry can be very helpful too. Yeah, baby, you're 100%. He says, anger not expressed can be turned inward into sadness. Yep, absolutely. Rick asked, well, expressed anger is violence. No, no, not necessarily. Not unless it's used to, intimidate or hurt another person. So if you're going out expressing, um, you would want to express anger in a way where, like, if you're screaming or yelling, you're not doing it at a person or around another person. Maybe you get in your car and you just scream, or maybe you hit a pillow. These kinds of things. Journaling can help. Writing a letter can help. Starting it off with something along the lines of, I'm really angry. Start writing a letter, dear, insert person's name, dear so and so. And then listing out, I'm really angry about, uh, a kind of X, Y, and Z. And I felt this way about it. I'm also really angry about this. This was not okay. This was outrageous. I can't believe you took advantage of this, or you exploited or manipulated or whatever. Kind of getting clear and writing it out, and maybe just using those words. You know what? I feel violated. And it can be words surrounding anger. I feel violated. I feel like um, this was outrageous. This was wildly inappropriate. This was disgusting. This was um, horrific. Nobody should be treated like this. Using those words to describe those feelings, um, of having your boundaries violated so horribly, can help kind of get in tune with anger. Laura said, I kickboxed in my 30s and that helped. Yeah. That's a good point. Um, a lot of good points here. Darlene is saying, if you're angry and talk to the person calmly and rationally, it's not violence, but it is still expressed. Absolutely. Right. And that's assertiveness, right? So that's the difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness. Aggressiveness is like expressed, um, I guess you could say it's expressed anger in an angry way, whereas assertiveness is um, expressed anger, but in a cool, calm, collected, tactful, and direct way. The difference too is aggressiveness um, is kind of that unbridled anger, and it's oftentimes used to intimidate another person or just to use them as an emotional punching bag. Whereas assertiveness, the end goal is for some sort of solution. So two very different goals there. Um, let's see, let me scroll up here. That's all very valid. Yeah, Gwen says, yeah, minimizing his behavior in all ways, feeling like I have to roll with it and be the bigger person. Well, and that might be true, you know, um, on a day-to-day basis, especially if there's kids involved. Um, yeah, it is. It's unfair, isn't it? To be like, okay, you know what? He caused so much damage, and that you're the one, he gets to play the victim, and you're the one that has to kind of pull yourself together and try to keep everything else together. Yeah, that's absolutely. It's frustrating, it's anger, it's rage inducing. But realizing while that might still be true, it's still okay to feel angry. And um, you can still feel a certain way and then behave a certain way. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So sometimes too, with anger, it can be the feeling of I'm almost uncertain or intimidated by the thought of tapping into it because, well, what if I can't turn it off again? So keeping it at a low, like a simmer, right, on a very low level, sometimes can feel safe. But and this is why I think it can be helpful to kind of plan sometimes to intentionally experience anger or sadness, to allow ourselves that. So we're not kind of feeling like, oh, I don't know, it's gonna be like a fire hose if I turn it on. Like I don't know if I can turn it off again. And I don't have time for this. I got kids, I got work, I've got a life. There's these things. I've got to be the one to hold it all together and to somehow be the bigger person and move forward, or whatever it might be. And realizing, yeah, your sadness, your anger, your rage, all of that's completely valid. that those are normal, reasonable responses to absolutely horrific, um, outrageous situations. So let's see. Rick says, oh no, he says, I experience sadness very easily, maybe too easily. Yeah. And some people do, uh, I think the kind of the added component to this is if a person, especially if a person grows up in a home where they're not allowed to express anger. And this is, I think this is the case for most people, um, especially kind of my generation or older. It's you're not allowed to express that. Parents didn't like it. You were kind of uh, validated or encouraged or um, got attention if you were doing what they wanted you to do. And if we disagreed, if we said no, if we kind of wanted to go against the rules, if we had an issue with things, or if we were angry, then that emotion wasn't appreciated or wasn't validated in the slightest. And so when a child has certain emotions that go unvalidated for a long time, they really turn down the volume on them and have difficulty experiencing them. And as kind of a default, because those emotions don't go away, they just change form. So they might turn into a different emotion. They might turn into a series of behavior like maladaptive behavior. It could turn into a host of physical issues, pain, inflammation, that kind of thing. I've known several people that have such a hard time with not it's not even anger. It's on the outskirts of anger, like irritation and frustration, like having their boundaries crossed in fairly mild ways that they struggle so much with being assertive. And so these types of situations cause them so much distress that they just start crying. And um, very out of tune with anger because it's that feeling of, I think, especially for people that have more of that anxious style of attachment, where it's, they're tired of loss. And so they want to kind of keep relationships together at all cost. And that tends to mean uh, not being assertive, because assertiveness means some degree of confrontation. And confrontation means rocking the boat. And rocking the boat means the boat might dump over and they lose the relationship or the friendship. And, you know, so yeah, there's kind of a lot that can be intertwined with that. Magladoro says, it's my 45th birthday, and yeah, I feel like I'm nothing and I have no future. I can't handle being around other people on my birthdays and have often tried to arrange things only to cancel them. Okay. Yeah, it definitely sounds like, yeah, some self-esteem, a lot of self-esteem stuff in that and what you're telling yourself, and some very limiting beliefs. What would the opposite look like? You said, I feel like I am nothing. What would what would being a something look like and feel like to you? What is your definition of a something or a someone? And what would be your definition of a future? So if you were to feel, let's say next year for your 46th birthday, what, and then kind of, okay, so kind of going along, following that train of thought, what would need to change in order for you to feel like a someone and that you did have a future? So I think too, sometimes getting clear uh, on what that would look like and what are some of the changes that would need to happen can help tremendously. Because if we're talking about some really major limiting core beliefs that are absolute like that, like I am nothing, I have no future, that feels very limiting and feels a lot like a lack of power. And the reality is those two things aren't true. They might feel true, but they're not true. And so, getting clear on, okay, well, what would it look like to be a someone? What would it look like to have a future? And then it'll give you clarity of, oh, okay, yeah, that's what that would look like. And then you can start taking steps. And I think a lot of it just realizing that this all or nothing thinking, that you are nothing, that you have no future, it's not accurate. And so there is possibility out there for more. And frankly, the uh, there's more that's already out there that exists right now. It's just going to be kind of getting you to see it. Okay, let me scroll down here. Yep. BB says, oh, yes, 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 with the sadness. Not only not validated, but invalidated and punished for those feelings and boundaries. It's a two-layered thing, not allowed and also punished. That makes complete sense. Yeah. Whenever there's an absence of something, whenever there's extremes, there tends to be more to that. So if a person is experiencing kind of one emotion, it tends to be their default. So for example, if it's sadness, or what they're calling sadness, of they get stressed out, they cry. They get angry, they cry. They uh, they're overwhelmed, they cry. They're tired, they cry. If there's kind of this imbalance where it tends to be one emotion, or that you could even use the emotion of anger. They're tired, they get angry. They're late for work, they get angry. You know, whatever it might be, there tends to be more there to unpack. And so yeah, so kind of a lack of certain emotions, a lack of a full range of emotions. That's a better way to say it. Of yeah, kind of like happiness, sadness, anger, and a lot of the other emotions that kind of fill in between those three areas of kind of exploring. Okay, do I experience one emotion primarily, and am I out of tune with another emotion, and why? Why is that? And if you don't know, then you can ask yourself, well, if I had to take a guess, what would I guess? And it's amazing what your brain can come up with when it's not having to be right. So just taking a guess. Well, if you did know, what would you say? Vinchester says, I know this is a common question, but personally, do you believe a narcissist can change? That's such a big question. Um, it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the the degree and frequency of their behavior. Um, right there, that's a lot of it. It's going to depend on if they have a sincere and driving desire to change. It's going to depend on the kind of um, therapy or self help work that they do. It's going to depend on the plan that they come up with, on how they're going to reflect upon the results. The problem with people that are very high in narcissism is they're incredibly defensive. And when a person's incredibly defensive, they're not teachable and they're not introspective. It's everybody else's fault, and that they don't need like they don't need to do anything different. So that's that's the biggest challenge, is a person like that, when they have all their walls up, if they have no desire to change, they don't think that any of their behavior is a problem, they blame everything on everybody else, then first of all, that's a ton of work. That's a ton of work for a person who even has for any therapist out there that's even willing to take that on. uh, it's also a ton of work for the person who would be going into therapy. And here's the other, there's so many challenges with this, okay? Is let's just say you had a narcissist in your life and they're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go to therapy, I'm going to do the work. It's not that straightforward. So this goes back to, okay, well, what is the plan? How are you going to assess the results of is your approach working? Because here's the thing, we all tend to be very we tend to lack insight into our own behavior. We all do. We all have blind spots. So it's very difficult for a person who already is so defensive that they don't think that they're really doing anything wrong. They're not seeing their behavior accurately. And if part of their, let's just even say that they're open enough to be like, well, I'm going to ask my spouse for feedback. That's tough, and it's tough for any one of us because nobody likes criticism. Even if it's constructive, it can still sting. And for a person who's defensive, in many ways their ego is raw. It's paper thin. And so bringing something up to them, no matter how tactfully you do it, for them it feels like an attack. And when a person feels attacked, they go into fight or flight mode, and they go right back into that defensiveness. And for them, it's more about being right than it is about being able to take feedback. So there's lots and lots and lots of challenges present. And it's because it's not just the behavior, it's their whole mindset that drives their behavior. So could you teach, could you teach an abusive person to not hit? Potentially, you know, but there's it's a huge risk. I mean, there are like abuser kind of rehabilitation programs, but um, it's not anything that I would ever encourage a target of abuse to hold out hope for, because more often than not, their behavior escalates and becomes even more violent. But even the ones that do stop hitting, uh, tend to just use more of verbal and emotional and psychological abuse instead. So when a person has such outrageous behavior where they really struggle with empathy, remorse, accountability, they're very defensive, and they have no problem with being emotionally, verbally, physically abusive to another person, that's deeply problematic. So it's a lot more than just kind of coming at each skill one on one, because that kind of stuff, we all learn how to regulate our behavior and kind of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate by about the first grade. If a person doesn't have those skills down by first grade, that's a huge, huge, huge problem. Huge. And if they've been doing it, if they're, you know, uh, 20s, 30s, 40s, now they've been doing this pattern. They've had this pattern of behavior now for several decades. So it's very much reinforced. It's how they go through life. Behavior change is challenging for any one of us, no matter what that behavior is. It can help. And here's the thing, it's always easier for outsiders, right? I guess, to look at other people and to be like, gosh, will they ever change? Or I don't get it. Like, why is it a problem? For example, for a person that doesn't have a drinking problem, to look at an alcoholic, they don't get it. Like, what's the problem? Just don't drink. Well, not that simple. Or if you've ever watched that show, like My 600 Pound Life, to a person that doesn't have an eating disorder, seeing a person who's binge eating, thousands and thousands of calories at a time, is sort of like, gosh, what's wrong with them? They just need to not get junk food, or not eat that much. It's an oversimplification, just like to an abusive person, oh, they just need to stop abusing. There's so much more going on there than just the behavior. The behavior isn't the problem. The behavior is a symptom of a much larger problem. So, and that's the challenge when you've got somebody who has that level of aggressiveness and defensiveness and a lack of empathy and a lack of remorse. The odds are, the odds of them doing tremendous amount, they're not a person, the odds of them doing a tremendous amount of damage in your life, if you were to keep them in your life, is incredibly high. I would put it at like 99.95%. So if you have a problematic person in your life, holding on to hope that they change is not a strategy. That's denial. That's optimism fueled denial. So healthy boundaries are absolutely necessary. And if it is your situation where you're like, well, gosh, can this person change and whatnot, to get very clear about what kind of changes you would need to see and in what time frame and what the cost is going to be to you emotionally and physically and possibly financially to stay in this relationship with this person. So I hope that helped. Okay, let me scroll here. Darlene says, I always avoided confronting people for fear of losing the relationship. But just recently, I realized that if you confront someone nicely and lose the relationship, it was likely unhealthy, anyways. Yeah. And it wasn't much of a relationship, right? If one uncomfortable conversation is going to end it, then it was hanging on by a thread, anyhow. There was no real relationship there. It was just niceness. As two people hanging out. That was a big aha moment for me too, because I was the exact same way. I still struggle with assertiveness and bringing up issues. It's a challenge, you know. It's a challenge, and um, yeah, it's that. And I think too, kind of reframing it and understanding that um, we won't know what relationships in our lives are real until we're able to be real. And that they're able to be real. If all we're experiencing is niceness from another person, that can be very unnerving because we realize, oh, they're still at the stage of being polite. So if we look at it in terms of, relationships have stages, and there's that initial stage of, romantic relationships, it's infatuation, but in friendships, it's kind of the same. It's the same thing, but it's not sexual. It's that, oh, this person's so amazing. We have so much in common. It's my new BFF, right? Kind of a feeling. Relationships don't start to even take root until there's a disagreement or until, yeah, really a disagreement. A boundary has been set. You realize differences between the two people start to show up. That's when the relationship starts to take root. And it's how those differences are navigated by both people makes all the difference. So a lack of confrontation isn't a sign of a healthy relationship. It's a sign of poor communication. And kind of realizing that, it's like, oh, okay. And so, and once we do realize that, we start to gravitate more towards those relationships where people are able to be assertive, because then we can breathe. It's like, okay, I know where I stand with this person, and I know if they have an issue, they're going to bring it up. They're not going to just try to minimize it, and it's not going to just fester, and then they're going to explode on me 5 years later. So assertiveness, if a relationship's ever going to stand a chance of going anywhere, it's going to be because of your boundaries and because of assertiveness, not in spite of them. So yeah, kind of reframing that can be very helpful. Um, Okay. So Magalodora says, okay, being a something would be terrifying. I don't know what a someone or a something would be. Okay, I'm going to stop reading right now, and I'm going to kind of bounce that back to you, because if you know what a nothing is, then kind of by contrast, you would know what a something is, right? So if we know what a nothing, okay, so then maybe let's just start there. Okay, so then what is a nothing? What does that look like? What are the parameters of being a nothing or a nobody? Let's start there. And he says also, in terms of a future would be me being able to look after myself instead of being on disability. Okay. Okay. So a future would be you being able, when you say look after yourself, are we talking, um, I guess, to what degree? Financially, physically? What would looking after yourself entail? Huh, I love that. Ember says, on my daily check off to do list, I literally have act empowered today or acted empowered today. I love that. That's great. Okay, let me scroll down here. Amber, welcome. Says, hey guys, late to the chat, but happy to be here. Yeah, critical mass says they know for narcissists, they have to want to change. The reason people do not change is that they do not want to. There's that lack of motivation. And Jack was saying, I think it can be more than motivation. I agree. It's both, right? So there has to be at least some desire to want to change, and it has to be sustained motivation. That's the added challenge. And I think we can all relate, right? I mean, come on. It's it's like setting a New Year's resolution or wanting to lose weight or um, anything that's going to require more than just doing one thing. Anything that's going to require some effort, it's going to require sustained motivation. And that path to actual change, it's full of failure. That's what can be so, it can feel so defeating. We're on a diet and then we slip up and we eat something that we quote unquote shouldn't be eating, and or we eat too much or whatever it might be, and then it's this feeling of, oh, kind of slide into that learned helplessness. Oh, it's never going to change. There's no point in doing this. Or maybe we start justifying it. Well, maybe this isn't the right diet for me, and I need to do something else. And we start kind of playing with the plan, and maybe the plan needs to be played with. But there's so many moving pieces to kind of figure out that need to be examined along the way. But a person's got to have that level of sustained motivation and um, kind of optimism and belief in themselves that they'll eventually get it figured out. And so when they stumble and fall, they're able to realize, to like kind of not kick off a shame spiral, but they're able to realize, okay, this didn't work. What do I need to do different? So let's say, I don't know, they're going to, I don't know, a 12-step program, AA, NA, OA, you name it. And they don't go to meetings that often. Well, maybe the issue uh, is that the meetings are kind of, they're at 5:30 and they don't get off work until 5. And so they're always late and they feel very uncomfortable walking into a meeting that's already started. And so then maybe the solution is, okay, I'll go to a meeting at a different time or on a different day. So things like this, like it can be a lot of continual trial and error until we figure out what works. So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Um, Clover says, my narcissistic ex was perfect for me. We really were soulmates. Is a narcissist seriously willing to throw away the love of their life? I know he will never have what we had with anyone else. Okay, so here's the thing with people that are again high on that level of narcissism, their level of self-absorption, it's coming from a place of defensiveness. When defensiveness is present, connection is not. So while that relationship felt to you like you were really soulmates, that um, that he was the love of your life, and that you had this amazing thing, for him, there wasn't that depth of emotional connection there. And this isn't a reflection of you; it's a reflection of him. So those that are kind of high on high on that narcissism, it's they have more of an avoidant attachment style. They just don't bond to other people like a normal person or a person with a secure attachment style does. And that can be very difficult to wrap our mind around of, man, I thought we just had this amazing connection. I thought we had this amazing life. And like, really, you would throw it all away for what? But the reality is, it's that kind of unbridled selfishness that goes hand in hand with pathological levels of narcissism. They don't, they want what they want in the moment. There is no depth there. They move on quickly, and um, they tend to not look back unless they need something. So there is, I don't know if there's much greater pain out there than um, kind of loving somebody or feeling this intense connection with somebody who pretends to feel the same, but really they're just kind of a black hole inside, and it's just all of this selfishness. It's horrible, and I'm so sorry. Right? Darlene was saying, for a person to change, you have to admit that you're wrong and to want to change. A narcissist refused to admit that they could ever possibly be wrong about anything ever. Yep. Yeah. I mean, we're talking, it's a massive overhaul on every single level. That's the challenge with personality disorders, is especially narcissism or antisocial personality disorder, is there's so much work that needs to be done. For a person that even wants to do the work, for them to come into therapy, odds are like uh, odds are they're not an accurate historian about events in their past, because they're seeing things through their pathology. And so you're not, as a therapist, like you're not getting the full story. You're getting a very minimized, justified, highly edited version of it. And if there's no counterbalance to that, if you don't have, um, you know, charges like a police report, or, um, somebody else that's experienced this behavior to kind of fill in the blanks, how, how is that therapist supposed to know what's real and what's not? So it's like, it's very, very challenging. And generally people that are high in that level of defensiveness, that don't experience guilt or remorse, um, you know, like they're not motivated to work on themselves. So even if they did get into therapy, odds are it's not going to be because of their behavior. They might get into therapy for other reasons. Maybe they had an abusive parent. Maybe they had a boss that they hated. Maybe they um, had a relationship that went sour that they're really upset about. But it's hard, even with people that are, on the scale of like reasonably well adjusted. Criticism, anybody kind of shining that mirror back at us, it's hard. Like it's hard to see. And it's a natural human response to feel defensive when we feel attacked. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not, it's, um, yeah. And I think too, people can get caught up in, and I know people do get caught up in this, is, and this is what was catching me up with that question, is the difference between a narcissist and a person with that's high in narcissism, right? Or a person like, what's the difference between a narcissist and a quote unquote normal person with a ton of, selfish, exploitative behavior who lacks empathy, guilt, and remorse? Like, what's the difference? And the real reality is not much. So, in order to meet the to get diagnosed, that's a certain number of traits. It's a checklist. I forget how many, like 9, 12 different traits. And it's okay. Does this person meet this criteria? And generally it's only a handful of the criteria. So this is, and the thing is with the DSM, it doesn't measure uh, severity of behavior. And in a diagnosis, especially when it comes to personality disorders, especially ones that are, well, really, I guess all of them, it's a diagnosis is used for a treatment plan. And whether you want to refer to it as like narcissistic, I guess here's the thing. I wouldn't get so much caught up on the diagnosis. It's the traits, it's personality traits that are the problem. So even if a diagnosis isn't present, it doesn't mean that those personality traits aren't present and aren't a problem. So regardless, diagnosis or no diagnosis, it's the same traits that are going to be addressed in a treatment plan. And it's going to be a very similar process with kind of, how to move forward. So, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Huffle Mom. She says, I can't stay, dear heart. I have to go do some care and keeping. Thank you for all you do. Be at peace. Well, thank you, my dear. And thank you for all that you do. And I hope you have an absolutely delightful rest of your evening. Let's see. Let me scroll up. John saying, I do think the narcissist I've known have a developmental brain problem that they cannot see or change. A part of the brain seems missing. Daughter at the age of 8 had tons more empathy. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it's more in nature and nurture kind of a thing. So I think that the number of, well, I don't even want to say that narcissists necessarily come from abusive homes, although probably there's probably a pretty high percentage of them that do. Uh, it's, again, this stuff, like how to handle rejection, how to accountability, responsibility, kind of all of these really vital life skills aren't taught. And I think about this all the time. Probably I hope 50 years from now, 100 years from now, people are going to look back on this time in society and just be like, oh my gosh, can you believe that? Can you believe that we didn't have any emotional like skills training for kids? How on earth? Like how on earth? Or, uh, you know, how? No wonder people were in jail all the time, or that there was all of this chaos Like what a bizarre thing that there is this society that these skills weren't taught. Like, of course things don't work out, right? And a lot of like the very sociopathic people that I've known, it's and worked with over the years, a lot of them haven't um, experienced anything really like outside the realm of kind of normal human experience. So no horrific abuse, no uh, sexual molestation, no um, any of that, and just yeah, I don't know. I think my guess is that there's probably certain times in a person's life where they go into crisis mode, where their ego can't handle a certain thing. Maybe it's rejection, maybe it's too much responsibility, maybe it's feelings of insecurity, and then they kind of, um, overcompensate for that. Or, I mean, gosh, it could be any number of things. And then that behavior is not corrected, or maybe it goes unidentified and not corrected, or maybe it's a thought of, oh, they'll just kind of grow out of it, kind of a thing, which, that's not a good strategy. So, um, yeah, yeah, but I mean, obviously, like you're right, John. You can see um, person's behavior when you really start to see it for what it is. It's like there's something profoundly wrong with this person. Logic and reason does not work on them. They might think that it does, which is even stranger when you encounter that. They think they're so smart. They think they've got it all figured out. They think uh, um, they rewrite reality to make it their own, which is insane. I've said for a long time, and I've caught a lot of heat for this over the years, but for me, my understanding of, or my perception of pathological degree of narcissism, it's it's a functional level of psychosis. And it's absolutely terrifying that we have people kind of roaming the earth who are able to continually rewrite reality on the fly, live in their own reality nonetheless, and justify their behavior. And it goes on. And all they do is cause a tremendous amount of hurt and heartache and damage to everybody in their path. It's yeah, it's beyond frustrating, and beyond frustrating the way that this stuff is handled, especially like in the courts and the legal system. This whole idea of uh, kind of putting people in prison, and where again, there's like, I mean, nobody's going to come out of that experience better, and especially a person that's already high in defensiveness. And it's sort of like if you have let's say you have like an angry dog, like a junkyard dog, right? They're angry for whatever reason. You've got this really angry person, you put them in this extreme environment, it's going to make them worse, not better. And there's no kind of life skills or emotional skills taught. None of that stuff is processed. It just gets worse. This idea of, well, we'll just keep them locked in a cage and then they'll somehow get better. It doesn't work. And and then release them back into society. It's like we're creating even bigger monsters. It, it's just frustrating. Okay. Luna says, how do I deal living with SO with something imitating sister that always goes on replacing me and stealing my voice and my personality. And when I see her, I have a panic attack that I need to handle. Okay, I'm not sure if I understand the question. Could you Could you reword that? So you have a sister, if I understand it correctly, okay, that you have a sister that is kind of stealing your personality. Is that correct? And when you see her, you have panic attacks. Um, let me see here. Let me scroll up. Sorry, guys. Scrolling up, scrolling up. Lady G says, what causes or influences a person to lack guilt or remorse? And can that be reversed? Well, it depends. People lack guilt and remorse for different reasons. Like there's cognitive, like developmental reasons behind it. There's um, brain changes. You have potential brain injuries that can cause changes to a person's personality. Um, you know, other cognitive changes, Alzheimer's, for example, can cause lack of all kinds of things. If we're talking like personality disorder wise, like with narcissism, it's that lack of guilt and remorse comes from that defensiveness. So think about in your own life. Well, when you've done something that you've done something maybe even wrong, quote unquote wrong, but you've justified it to yourself. So you see like it's not that big of a deal. You know, we all kind of right and wrong, uh, this kind of stuff, it's not so black and white. So, for example, if we read about a child molester who was, I don't know, let's say, I don't know, a person, uh, they've been abused for a long time and then they kill the abuser, kind of a thing. They might feel justified in killing the abuser. Or even the person that, let's say, even the person that works on death row who gives lethal injections, assuming assuming that everybody that they're killing is, you know, horrific, you know, criminals, and you know, that they believe them to be horrific criminals, then they're not going to have guilt or remorse about that because they think they're doing the right thing. The emotion of guilt, it's the feeling of I did something bad. That's only present if we think we did something bad. If we're able to justify it, or if we don't, if we feel entitled to it. Here's a better example: slavery. Okay, how on earth did you have so many people, still to this day, so many people going around owning other human beings, raping them, selling their children, beating them, destroying them? How does that happen? Well, it's simple. You don't see certain people as people. You see them as somehow less than. And that's exactly what happened with slaves. It was this, and then of course you had this message also tangled up with religion of, oh, well, you know, um, it's okay for us to own slaves. And it's that entitlement, that unbridled entitlement. And you know, then you get laws that further reinforce these kinds of things. So there's lots of different ways. And it's not just narcissists that struggle with that. Any of us can fall into that. That's what's so terrifying. So we really have to, you know, I think kind of always make sure that we're checking in with our moral compass, especially when it involves actions that we're taking that could potentially hurt other people. The most recent example, people that stormed the Capitol. They might have some guilt and remorse now that there's consequences, but at the time, they really felt like they were doing the right thing. They were freedom fighters, that the government was under attack by other people, not them, that they were defending the government. So a lot of guilt and remorse has to do with mindset, person's mindset at the time. Um, so how do you reverse that? I think doing a lot of education about appropriate accountability and responsibility and rights and respect, understanding that treating another person with treating, see, the difficult people like to get tangled up in this, and it just makes me nuts. So I'll like try to say this as smoothly as I can. People, I hear from a lot of very defensive, aggressive people. Oh, well, I don't have to respect anybody. I don't want to, and you got to earn it. Da, 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 da. But the reality is, it's a basic human right to treat other people. If you don't like the word with respect, if you feel like respect is something that needs to be earned, okay, but treating them respectfully is still fundamental. Treating other people respectfully. It's manners. That's what it is. It's manners. It's something that we tend to learn by the time we finish elementary school. It's not asking too much. So teaching what it means to have manners and what it means to treat other people respectfully, and having honest conversations about how easy it is for very dysfunctional messages about entitlement, how that can come up and um, kind of sway people into acting in horrific ways. Maybe otherwise normal, decent people who have some really, really damaging belief systems. Let's see here. Let me scroll. Let me scroll up here. Austin says it only takes one trait to destroy a marriage or a relationship. Yep. Yep. I mean, and there's quite a few that a kind of happy, healthy, nourishing relationship requires. And at the core, it's going to be effective communication. So being able to be assertive on a regular basis, because boundaries, when you've got two people that are being themselves, you're going to have differences that surface. And there's nothing wrong necessarily with differences. It's how those differences are navigated, which is, if it's handled well, it's going to be with dignity and respect. And it's going to be ideally very close to the time when those differences surface. So, assertive communication from both people, and uh, emotional maturity, and the ability to introspect and to be growth oriented. If you're with somebody who just wants to, who, like, cannot acknowledge anything that they do is wrong, or will not apologize, or was stubborn and just shuts down all communication, that it's not going to work. There's no relationship that's done. Like it gets things get thrown into neutral, and then you're just in a holding pattern, because now that relationship has completely stopped growing because of that behavior. So yeah, uh, it's a challenge. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll here. Uh, scroll, scroll, scroll. BB says, hey, wonderful stream. Keep up the wonderful work. Good night. Well, good night. Thank you for joining us. Grandparents asks, why does everyone think you're crazy when you leave the relationship? Well, my guess is if they have if somebody has a problem with some sort of action you're taking, it's because they're operating on a different set of information. Either information, they have different information or they have a different belief system. If they had the information that you had and the belief system that you had, they would probably take the same action as you. So, in terms of abusive um, abusive people, again, there's a difference between um, kind of hearing about abusive behavior and then being on the receiving end of it. So, of course, it's 1,000 times more painful when we're on the receiving end of cold, calloused, cruel, uh, negligent or indifferent kind of behavior, or belittling or put downs, you name it. It's one thing to be on the receiving end of that, it's another thing to hear about it. And so if a person's just hearing about it, to them it might seem not that big of a deal because they're not on the receiving end of it. There's not that emotional investment that you have, or that emotional experience, I should say, that you're having. So for them, they don't see that. What's the big deal? So that's part of it. And they also might have some beliefs that might say something along the lines of family is forever, commitment is forever, relationships take hard work, nobody's perfect, these kinds of things. These disempowering messages really keep people stuck. All of those platitudes are wonderful, but to a point, only if they're within that context of healthy boundary standards and deal breakers. Because sociopaths have families too, narcissists have families too, right? So if we think about how ridiculous those beliefs are when they're misapplied, or how dangerous, I should say, they are when they're misapplied, we can see the how illogical they are. If your son is Charles Manson and you're like, oh well, forgive and forget, and you gotta, nobody's perfect, and of course, well, he's our child, we just need to let him move back in, this kind of thing. No, it's okay and healthy to have deal breakers and to have boundaries with other people. But a lot of times I think people, when they kind of fall into this well-intended bad advice, or they think, oh, well, you should just, you should let this person back in your life. They're your mother, or, whatever it might be. They're your child or they're your spouse. And, um, you know, they just need more rehab or religion or therapy or love. It's, to me, it just shows it's very clear to me that they don't have an accurate understanding of abusive behavior. So I guess over the years, for me, I've become very desensitized to that. I see this, it's this well-intended bad advice. I see it for what it is, and I don't even argue about it because it's like screaming into the wind because they don't see it. They don't see it. And until they're on the receiving end of it, they're just not going to get it. So you're better off kind of taking that energy and that uh, going elsewhere with it and not getting roped into these conversations, because the reality is you don't have to explain to anybody. So it doesn't really matter what they think, like, or if they agree with you, you know, they're not going to get it. And thankfully your life is not a democracy and they don't get a vote. So you're going to do what you want to do. And if, uh, if they have an issue with it, well then, okay, like, so be it, but it doesn't impact you any, you know? Okay, let's see. Um, I'd say I only caught part of this. Pauline says, I've gone no contact with the narcissist in my life. I don't reply to any text messages, and I'm concerned because he texts me when I turn on my bedroom lights. So he is somehow behind my apartment. I don't know what. Let's see, I'm gonna scroll down here. I don't know what to do. I'm just concerned because it's just me and my daughter. I just want him to leave me alone. And I think somebody else had mentioned here, calling neighborhood, look up the non-emergency police number and have it saved in your phone or written down somewhere or both, and let them know what's going on. Give them a description of him, give them a description of the vehicle, let him know that, he tends to text you or whatever when the light goes on, that you feel like he's stalking you. Um, they might encourage you to get a restraining order, so that's something to think about. At a minimum, it might be worth. I would definitely let the police know. Um, if there's any way that you can put up cameras, exterior cameras, or if your apartment complex has cameras, um, that would be a good investment. So you might want to talk to the non-emergency police about that as well. Maybe they can help kind of guide you. But I don't blame you. That's terrifying. It's terrifying when somebody doesn't respect your boundaries like that and they continue to harass you, and you have a feeling that they're outside, that they're stalking you. It's terrifying. So I would get some sort of self-protection if you haven't already. You want to, whatever you get, you want to make sure that you're comfortable using it. And um, one of, well, I have a big can of bear mace. It's not legal in a lot of places, um, but you can, I don't know, check your area, and hunting's, sports type places tend to carry it, or you can get it online. Another option is wasp spray. And it's both of which are definitely eye irritants. Bear mace is going to drop a charging bear. And that's the kind of stuff that I want. I don't own a gun. I don't like them. I grew up around them, but they make me nervous, and I don't feel comfortable having one. So that's why I don't have one. It wouldn't be the best form of protection. But these things, and I would encourage you, if you do end up getting some sort of weapon, again, make sure that you know how to use it and that you're comfortable using it, and that it's stored in a safe place. But yeah, just some thoughts to think about. But yeah, contact non-emergency police, and let them know what's going on. For sure. They might be able to do extra patrols in your area, especially if you have kind of a time frame. If you're like, okay, yeah, I'll be turning my light on at whatever, 10 o'clock. So he's got to be around there around then. And I would save all of the text messages from him, so you have a paper trail of he is in fact harassing you. So if you have to go for a restraining order, that you're able to show a judge something. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. She says, my apartment complex has cameras. The local police department is sending an officer out. I'm going to be jumping off the chat here. Thank you, everyone. Please pray for me and my daughter. Absolutely. Absolutely. You take care, sweetie. And we'll be sending thoughts your way, and keep us posted. Let us know if there's anything that we can help with. Okay, let's see. Um, Jennifer says, I just got pepper spray and it hooks to your keychain. It was only about $10. Yeah. And there is pepper spray. The Here's the thing. I would encourage anybody, if you're going to get some sort of like aerosol type spray, pepper spray, wasp spray, bear mace, whatever it is, again, knowing how to use something so it's not so that it's not used against you, and that it's also not a false sense of protection. Mace expires, just FYI. I did not know this. I learned this um, not necessarily by accident, but uh, I, I was messing around with it. This was years ago, 10, 15 years ago. No, it was more than that. God, 20 years ago. I had mace on my keychain, and I thought one day, I'm curious. I'm going to spray it. And I sprayed it, and it was just this like solid orange stream. And it was like, the range was not very far. I mean, I would basically have to climb up like a little koala bear on you know up onto somebody and have them look up at me and spray them. I mean, it was ridiculous. So know get familiar with whatever you're going to use. You in With mace, also something to know, when you spray it, you want to look away, because especially if you're outside, because the wind can blow it right and will blow it right back at you. So you want to know what kind of spray is it, and how far does it spray. And sometimes too, they have the kind of difficult to maneuver mechanisms, spraying mechanisms. So kind of just getting familiar with, how do I use this? Do I have to like, spin the top around and then push down and then push something else in order to spray? Or is it just easy, like one trigger kind of a thing? So, and Gigi was saying regarding stalking, document, document, document. Yes, I agree completely. That's interesting. Shakira asks, do you think that some narcissism could be attributed to nutritional deficiencies? Hmm. My initial response, like what's coming to my brain, kind of says no. I don't think so. I mean, there definitely can be temporary personality changes with medication or nutritional deficiencies, like depression, anxiety come to mind. Narcissism, not so much, although I do remember reading some sort of study a while back that I, I, this could have been a weird dream. I don't think it was. I think it was a real study. Something to do with the bacteria in cat feces having the potential to cause uh, personality changes. I want to say like aggressiveness and some other kinds of really bizarre personality changes in people. But really, I mean, by and large, the thing with narcissism, because narcissism, it's a personality trait. We all have it. It's the degree and frequency, kind of the degree and frequency of it. That's the problem, right? So it ranges from healthy narcissism to like malignant narcissism. And um, and we all kind of slide up and down that scale. I mean, there's times where we might have, dive into, uh, more of, depending on all kinds of things. Trauma can cause a person to become a lot more like kind of it comes across as self-absorption, but it's more like isolation and a very much a focus on themselves because they want to avoid other people. Um, yeah. So I don't know. It's a scale. If we're talking about like personality disorder level, it's pervasive and persistent behavior that's gone on for like a significant amount of time, that's outside the range of what's considered normal for that person's age or culture. Um, Generally, this kind of stuff starts up in like teenage years. You can start seeing it pretty early on, and it just gets worse with time if left untreated or untreated, ineffectively treated. Let's see. Lady G says, I feel like I'm watching my husband learn in real time, truly connecting the dots on his antisocial personality disorder. I'm watching his cognitive dissonance regarding who he thought to who he actually is. He says he doesn't remember ever having to look at things from somebody else's perspective or having empathy. He remembers always fabricating stories and telling lies. I think PTSD from the military compounded it. Yeah, it definitely doesn't help. Um, and I don't know what kind of behaviors that you're that he has, or what kind of stuff, what I don't have context to your situation. But I will say that with antisocial personality disorder, you tend to have a person with that tends to have a complete lack of regard for other people. There really isn't any emotional depth there. They tend to be highly exploitative, so incredibly manipulative. And so there's more, you could say, like more emotional intelligence with the person with ASPD than one with NPD. And those that are on a sociopathic side of the spectrum tend to know what to say and do. Their ego isn't so frail that they can't admit that they're wrong or whatever. They oftentimes can say, they could do a great job of saying what they need to say or acting the part if it's going to get them off the hook. Whereas narcissists will go down with the ship. They have a really, really difficult time, even if they had a gun to their head, admitting that they were wrong or that they made some sort of mistake. So just be careful. Be careful with that and get clear on, um, yeah, just get clear, I guess, on what kind of changes you need to see and in what time frame and how you're going to protect yourself along the way. So, yeah, okay. Let's see. Ava says coyote spray. It's on Amazon. That's good to know. And as an alternative to bear mace. Marla says, what do you call it when your partner takes everything you say as an accusation against them, even when nothing is wrong and you did not accuse them of anything? Mm, well, I guess it's emotional reactivity. So when a person is that like easily activated, okay, or triggered, when it can be for any number of reasons, but at a minimum, it's kind of, it's not kind of, it's unhealed stuff within them. So if anything that you say, and it's probably not everything you say, right? It's probably anything that's within the range of criticism or maybe boundary setting. If they're feeling like you're accusing accusing them, or um, I don't know. I guess I would need more context, because sometimes that can be projection. Sometimes it can be very fragile self-esteem. Sometimes it can be fear of abandonment. Sometimes it can be narcissism. It just depends. So, like, for example, if like with more of a standard form of projection, it's where one person is taking their uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and projecting or putting them on to another person. So let's say, for example, um, they know that they steal, okay, or that they lie, but then they start accusing you of being dishonest or untrustworthy, and they become very focused on not feeling that you can be trusted, or they're cheating, but then they start randomly kind of hinting at or accusing you of cheating, or so that's projection, when that kind of stuff comes on out of the blue. And um, that's let me try to think of some other examples. They Let's say they say something like, "Oh, like, do you think we still be friends if we broke up?" Or, "I hope that you're never thinking of leaving me. Um, you mean so much to me." But th like, the reality is, then you kinda wonder, like, "Well, are you thinking of leaving me?" Like, that's a weird thing to say. Like, where did that come from? Things kinda like along those lines. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I guess I would need some more context. I'll be curious if you kinda add some more context with that. That's a good point. SC is talking about Daniel Amen, his thoughts, interesting insights about rage and other behavioral disorder stuff, which responds well to dietary change. Yes, no, that is true. I mean, d- diet, does impact behavior, but to the degree of which, uh, you know, uh, normally, I don't know. That's hard to say. Yeah, it can play a part, but if we're talking, problematic behavior kind of across the board, then it's probably more than dietary. Like, for example, a person can have low blood sugar and be really irritable. Uh, they they eat or drink something, then they're fine. They um, let's see. My nephew is allergic to red food dye. And when he was a kid, they he had this tick. He was getting this tick where his head would turn and his eyes would dart to one side. And it was after they finally took him to an allergist, and I mean, it was a long process, but they finally figured out it was red food coloring. He still to this day cannot eat anything with red food coloring in it. So yeah, diet does matter, but uh, with narcissists, you can kind of tell too, it's more the mindset. It's not so much just the behavior itself. Okay, let me scroll down here. Jen asks, how can we learn to love ourselves again? Well, I think it starts with getting clear on what loving ourselves means. And frankly, I don't think a lot of people fully understand that concept, again, because it's not taught, and it may or may not be role modeled for us. So I find it helpful to swap out the word love with value. So how do I value myself again? And that kind of gives more clarity. So valuing yourself is going to include all aspects of yourself. It's going to include uh, your body, your emotions, your time, your money, all of it, every aspect of you is and then asking yourself, what does it look like to value that? If a person, if I were to value this, what would that look like? If I were to treat myself without value in that area, what would that look like? So how would I know? How would I know if I'm valuing myself in this area? And of course, the answer to that's going to differ from person to person. But more often than not, it tends to be treating ourselves with value is things, doing things that benefit us in the long run. And so when I talk about really tuning into what's nourishing and what's draining and doing more of what's nourishing, I definitely mean for the long run. There's things in the moment that might not feel that nourishing, like going to the gym, right? That can be kind of draining, but in the long run, it's nourishing. Um, Going to the dentist, not super fun, but nourishing, healthy for us in the long run. So, thinking of it in that way, thinking of it in terms of, uh, yeah, giving yourself compassion and grace and understanding like you would a child or anybody else that you cared about. Uh, Kind of not expecting perfection. So, uh, being patient, being kind, being, mm, yeah, being compassionate. Um, when it comes to emotions, being in situations, refusing to tolerate abuse, refusing to be around people that are dangerous or damaging to you. So having boundaries, realizing boundaries are self-protective. It's not about punishing the other person. It's about treating yourself with value and having those limits. It's the same thing with our time, with money, with anything else. It's having limits around that. It's not to punish somebody else. It's to value that. So valuing, like, okay, so example, valuing our time would be putting our time into things that matter and making kind of across the board, making sure that we're saying yes when we mean yes and no when we mean no. So if we have this kind of knee-jerk reaction of saying yes or being a people pleaser, to work on bringing some space to that, so we're not defaulting um, into kind of not valuing our time, our energy, our emotions, our body, whatever it might be. So, uh, yeah. So I guess starting there, getting clear on what would it look like if I were to value myself in this way? What would I do the same or what would I do different? How would my relationships change or stay the same? And then maybe asking yourself if somebody who valued themselves were to kind of peek into my life, what would their thoughts about it be? This can help to be a visualization exercise. So thinking about somebody or maybe multiple people that Napoleon Hill writes about this in his it's old book. It's Think and Grow Rich. The concept in it that I think is fantastic is he talks about having kind of this I think like a round table discussion. So having these people that are either living or dead, real or fictional around this table, and each one maybe is known for a certain strength and that they're kind of your committee. So for example, you might have on there let's see who would be on there. I don't know, maybe the Dalai Lama, who's very, centered and Zen. Maybe you have, I don't know, Madonna, who's very assertive and very much a go-getter. Maybe you have Van Gogh, who's incredibly creative and artistic. Maybe you have Maya Angelou, who is a fantastic speaker and writer. So you have different people on there with different personality traits that you kind of, when you think of them, you think, okay, yeah, that's. it reminds me of this person. And it can be kind of an interesting way to kind of check in. It might sound so strange, but kind of check in with them and say, okay, well, how would like Van Gogh handle this? Or how would Madonna handle this? Or how would, whatever, these different people handle this? So if you have people that are on your committee that are like, okay, yeah, this person really does a great job with self-love, then kind of running that past them, like, well, what would they say about this? Just kind of, I don't know, different way to think about it. That's a great one. Jennifer says, along with how can I learn to value myself? How can I learn discipline? I know routine would help me, but it's very hard to implement it. Like in the morning, I really don't care to get out of bed immediately. And I end up spending half an hour on my phone, which I know is a terrible way to start the day, but I still do it. Okay, well, I guess it just depends. Why, I mean, frankly, why is that a terrible way to start your day? How is that any different than getting up and having a cup of coffee or reading the paper? I know that there's all kinds of self-improvement books out there that are like, yeah, you gotta, get up at 5 a.m. We're gonna go to the gym, we're gonna crush it, then we're gonna sit down and we're gonna write for 30 minutes, and then we're gonna meditate, and then we're gonna do some yoga, and then we're gonna review affirmations, and then. Okay, that's a little hardcore, but if that's somebody's routine, then and if that works for them, then so be it. If somebody else's routine is they get up and have a cup of coffee and read the paper, okay, it's different, it um I think just it doesn't make it any better or worse. I think it depends on the kind of the goals that you have, and being able to come up with a routine, living your life on your own terms. So you're not like, okay, well, yeah, this is, I've got to be disciplined. I've got to wake up at, 5, got to go to the gym. I got to do all these things because that's, I guess, paying attention to what is the belief that's supporting that? Is it the feeling of, well, if I was a responsible adult, this is what I would do. And if that's the case, then maybe kind of broadening your horizons of what a responsible adult is. Um, or if your routine doesn't work for you, if you really don't like it, and you're like, yeah, I think I'd much rather uh, spend that time, I don't know, not being rushed and take my time in the shower and getting ready and all of that. I would just encourage you to experiment. Don't try to lock yourself into something based on how you feel what you should be doing. Kind of experiment and see how you feel and what's working for you and what's not working for you. And then realize, okay, it's okay too if you really enjoy being all snuggly in bed and warm, especially in the winter, and rolling over and just scrolling around on your phone for 30 minutes or so. It's okay to do that a couple days of the week too. It's, you know, whatever works for you. UNA says half an hour on your phone. Oh my God, I'm on it so much more than that. Okay, all day long. LOL. Yeah. Oh, very cool. Ember says, yeah, Van Gogh and Maya Angelou, she says, who I saw talk at a York university I taught at, are definitely on my committee. Oh, I love that. Yeah, they would make good committee panelists. I agree. Uh, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Hey, Missouri Cowboy. I just saw ya. Welcome. Jennifer, back to the discipline thing. One of One of the things that I think helps with there's a couple things with cultivating new routines is, thinking of routine as a habit. Routines are just habits that we have. Some of them are empowering, some of them are disempowering, right? And a great way to kind of quote unquote develop that discipline in terms of habits is to link a new habit to an existing one. So, for example, um, well, okay, there's two parts to this. Link a new habit to an existing one. So that's that kind of cue or reminder of, oh yeah, like I need to do this. Um, like for example, because I tend to get busy and I just live in my own head all the time and forget things like you wouldn't believe. So Fridays is my day. It's for watering the plants and checking the bills and paying bills, basically. That's those things go together. So I don't forget. And now there's not that issue with dead plants and late bills because it's every Friday. Checking mail, paying bills, watering plants. I don't even have to think about it. It's just, and that's not even assigned to like a certain time of the day. It's just, I know that that's just a thing that happens on Fridays. Um, the other part to that is thinking about creating habits. Well, thinking about cultivating habits that are sustainable. And the best way to do that is to create habits that you actually enjoy. So that way they're pulling you, you're not having to push yourself to do them. So for example, let's say the person that my brother, take them as an example, total gym rat. He's in amazing shape, and he he absolutely loves going to the gym. But even when he doesn't love going to the gym, he still loves how he feels afterwards. And he knows that he would feel tremendously better going than he would not going. That he is very in tune with that he feels sluggish and just blobby if he doesn't go. Same thing with people. There's a, a gal I was talking to a couple months ago. I took this class from her, and she was saying that she started getting up at 5 a.m. And she has a new baby and she's married and all this, but she realized that she really values her alone time. And the only way that that was going to happen is if she got up before everybody else did. So she started getting up at 5 a.m. She's not a morning person. She doesn't like getting out of bed, but the enjoyment of her alone time outweighs the pain of getting up in the morning. So kind of thinking about our behavior in those terms of, we tend to be motivated to change when some sort of pain outweighs the complacency of what we're doing. And so getting leverage on ourselves. So if it's something that we really want to do, so like in this gal's situation, having alone time to have a cup of coffee, surf the internet, whatever she wants to do in the morning for like an hour or so before everybody else gets up, to really uh, be in that moment. So when she is up, just being in love with every single moment of, oh, this is amazing. This bathrobe is so comfortable. This cup of coffee is amazing. It's so nice and quiet in here. Oh, I just love, I don't know, scrolling through the internet and getting kind of, almost can feel indulgent of, okay, now I'm going to catch up on all my, I don't know, gossip, trash YouTube, as I like to call it. Just kind of these, it's just your time to unwind. You want to go play Farmville or whatever people are playing these days, that kind of thing. It's your time and it's however you want to spend it, kind of a thing. And so that pulls her out of bed. She doesn't have to push herself. That pulls her every single morning. Just like the gym pulls my brother because he's very in tune with how amazing he feels. He loves seeing progress. He's always, he does all these like fitness competitions and stuff like that. And, he just loves every step of that process. And it causes him tremendous amounts of pain when he starts feeling like he's backsliding or if he just doesn't go for a couple days. So, yeah, getting in tune with kind of what creates pain, what creates pleasure for you, what motivates you. And like I said, I'm a big fan of finding things that pull you. It's so much easier when something pulls you than having to push yourself every day because you feel like that you should. And same thing, kind of back to exercise. Um, if the gym isn't your thing, then figuring out, okay, well, what is? Like personally, I'm not a fan of the gym, but I love aerial yoga and I can't wait for the studio to reopen. That pulls me. I have to push myself to go to the gym. So, yeah. Just some thoughts. Okay. Shannon, okay, has a question. Let me see. Let me scroll. Oh, she asked, can we please do a guided meditation tonight, please? Yes, sure. We can do that. We can do that. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up. Yes, Monica says, like Louise Hay used to say, you don't should all over yourself. Yes. Yep, I love that. Jennifer says, it's just that everything is so depressing online. So it makes it a depressing start to the day. It just seems like it starts me off on the path of social media being addictive throughout the day. So, okay, well, it's kind of good that you have some clarity around that. Here's the thing too. Our brain is wired. It's kind of wired for conflict and chaos because it feels like it needs to know all of this stuff in order to keep us safe. So that's kind of that extra pull to this negativity. So kind of realizing human beings we're kind of hardwired for that. Um, but yeah, if it's a problem, which it sounds like it is. So if it's a depressing start to the day, then getting clarity on, okay, well then what would the opposite look like? If you had a magic wand and or maybe not even a magic wand. If you because if you had a magic wand, a great day would probably be involve unicorns and I don't know, an island and a lot of ice cream or something. I don't know. But if you could, like, what would a good start to a good day look like? So we'll keep the magic wand out of it. What would a good start to a good day look like? I guess what would you be doing and how would you feel? So starting there and then thinking about, okay, well, if the feeling and then working backwards, so reverse engineering it. So what would the feeling you would like to start the day with be? If it is excitement or um, fun stuff or something like that, then maybe you could maybe create a playlist of some songs to kind of get you in that vibe right first thing in the morning, or um, yeah. Let's see. I'm going to scroll down and see if you answered what that would look like. Um, Oh, she says, Shannon says, can we please do a guided meditation, but let me know at least 5 minutes before so I can brush my teeth first, okay? LOL. Okay, so by my time, it's 11:06 now. So how about we plan on doing that guided meditation at 11:20? How about that? So you've got 14 minutes to go wash your face and brush your teeth. Yeah, Kayla says, I really love how thorough everybody is about not overlooking anybody in the chat. I agree. It's a wonderful, wonderful group we have here in the chat, and uh, they're just an absolute godsend because I have to I stop the chat when I'm talking because it's too distracting to have it going in the on the side, side of my vision. So there tends to be things that I do miss, and thankfully the moderators are go above and beyond to trying to get my attention and make sure that I'm getting stuff covered. Oh, well, thank you, John. He says, I have not joined you here for years. So wonderful to see how this has grown with books and a new website. You are a gift, talented, and good. Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And this next year is going to be so exciting. I cannot wait. There's going to be lots of new things that we're going to be doing, and it's awesome to be able to grow all of this. And yeah, so yeah, you'll have to stay tuned. Give me about 3 or 4 months to really get some of these major changes in place, and yeah, so check back. Jennifer says, yeah, I've had a week off of work and that's what I've done like the whole week. Coffee, trash YouTube, Facebook games, Netflix. Not sure if it's the best thing. Yeah, well, I think a lot of it depends on kind of how you're feeling afterwards. There's definitely a time and place for binge watching a series on Netflix, and if doing it every now and again as a way to unwind, not a problem. Doing it, every day, then there might be something that you're avoiding. So let's see. UNA says, I'm good at bills, but I forget to water. When I notice they're already all dried out and dead. Hint, don't buy me plants. Yeah, that was my thing. Time would get away from me and I'd turn around and I've got this plant that's barely hanging on. And it's heartbreaking to me because like it's a living thing, and yeah, it took me a lot of trial and error to figure out just how to get on a schedule with watering plants. Again, this is a great way to think about behavior change. Like it's watering plants. You would think it wouldn't be that difficult. And yet, I was probably in my mid 30s before I figured that out, that I just needed to set one day aside a week to water them. And I had to kind of chunk these other tasks in there. That stuck. Putting it on a calendar, setting reminders, none of that worked for me. So, you know, yeah, behavior change is hard. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Let's see. Oh, okay. Lubna. Okay, that's right. I was going to look for, we were talking about your sister and all of that, kind of taking on your personality, and you were having panic attacks about it and everything. So, okay, here's the thing. We can't control it's a lot of it has to do with knowing what we can control and what we can't control. We can't control what she does, or her kind of absorbing your personality or your interests or these kinds of things. But what you can control in a lot of ways is how you're perceiving her behavior. So it sounds like right now it's feeling very smothering and very anxiety inducing. But you could also perceive it as she has no real sense of identity. And that's really sad. And the reality is probably over time her personality is going to continue to morph and change based on other people that she's around. So it's probably not going to just start and end with you. It's going to continue. And you could also kind of look at it too in some ways of, okay, she's absorbing your personality. And it's, they say imitation is, it's a form of flattery. And in many ways it is. So she's taking on, as annoying and as obnoxious as it is, she's taking on all of these traits with you because she, she likes all these things about you. So, and then maybe kind of examining too, um, and maybe I'm missing stuff in the chat, but her doing, I mean, I absolutely understand how frustrating it is and how just obnoxious and annoying and kind of space invasive it is. But exploring why you kind of think this is leading to panic attacks. Um, let's see. Jennifer says, I should make myself clean my makeup brushes when I do my laundry once a week, but for some reason I just don't. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Yeah, it could be. I mean, it could also be if we don't tend to have a clear, if we don't have the motivation for taking action, we don't tend to take action. So sometimes things that might not necessarily be causing us pain aren't really motivating. Like we know, okay, we should floss our teeth, we should wash our makeup brushes, we should do all this. But unless dirty makeup brushes are causing us to break out, or unless we're getting a lot of cavities, we might not have the motivation to change because what we're doing isn't really causing a problem or causing a visible problem. And so it can be kind of hard to get motivated to do something when we don't really see much of a point in it. So getting clear with yourself as to why you think you should do this. And everybody's motivation is different. That's the thing too. So that's kind of why those shoulds, not only do they not help, um, or not only are they kind of being bullying ourselves, they really don't help because shoulds don't motivate people. Like emotional reasons tend to motivate people the most. Knowing that, let's say you had an expensive, I don't know, set of makeup brushes, and if you don't wash them out, it's going to ruin them. That might be the motivation. Or if your face is breaking out, that might be the motivation. Um, it'd be great if we were motivated for kind of the most like self-love oriented reasons, but sometimes it's not that. Like sometimes a person, they might, it could be, I don't know, they have a baby and that's what makes them realize, okay, I've got to get into shape because I can't keep up with a baby and I want to be able to go to the park with my kid. That might be their motivation to finally drop the weight or uh, to handle their drinking or whatever it might be. So I guess just kind of examining like what motivates you, and then making any of the changes in your life that you're ready to take action on. That's kind of the added thing too with change is like that saying goes, there's no such thing as small change. And it's so true because change, it kind of sets things off in motion. It's like knocking over that first domino. So making one change tends to lead to another, that leads to another, that leads to another. And then over time, those changes just become absorbed into our identity. So then it's no longer you're pushing yourself, to go to the gym anymore, or whatever it might be. It's sort of like, okay, this is just part of who I am. Like I really like working out. I really like getting up early. It's not something that we're having to push ourselves to do. It's part of kind of our core, like our core identity. So, okay, let's see. Um, okay, so yeah, I guess it's time. That's a we can pick up on that next time, Jennifer. We can go more into that. She asks, what exactly happens in the brain to make antidepressants work and anti-anxiety medications work? It's different mechanisms for different medications. Uh, and yeah, well, I guess just real quick with antidepressants, there's different classes. So you have like selective serotonin, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And they, instead of the brain kind of recycling serotonin, it kind of says, hey, no, you need to make new serotonin. So it does that. Um, that you also have SNRI, selective, drawing a blank. SNRI is like, Wellbutrin is an SNRI. Hold on. Norepinephrine. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Serotonin, norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors are a different class of antidepressants. And they help the brain to produce um, more instead of recycling it. Sorry, let me get back to the chat. There we go. And anxiety tends to do the opposite. So instead of producing more, it produces less. Different chemicals, but it helps to kind of just take that edge off. But we can get more into that. So yes, are we finishing up? Yes. So let's do that. Let's do our guided meditation and then we'll call it a night, and I will see you guys next week. So if you would like to take some time, find a place that's comfortable, and whether that's sitting down or lying down, just take some time to just be settled here in the moment. So take some deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. allowing yourself to settle into this present moment. Releasing thoughts of maybe regret or anger or hurt from the past. Releasing thoughts of stress or anxiety or worry about the future. Maybe perhaps imagining releasing these feelings like you're releasing helium balloons. Just letting them go easily and effortlessly. And if more surface, then just continue to release them. Allowing yourself to be here in the present moment. And continuing to breathe. Now turning your attention inward and doing a body scan, noticing if there's any places that you're holding stress or tension. And as you breathe, sending those breaths to those spaces, to those places of tension, and allowing those deep, healing, cleansing breaths to just easily and effortlessly unwind any tension that you're storing. And now placing one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach. As you breathe in, sending that breath deep down into the bases of your lungs, down into your stomach, so that as you breathe, it's not so much your chest that rises and falls, but it's your stomach. And again, turning your attention inward, and this time bringing such a level of stillness and focus to where you can feel or even hear your heartbeat. Being fully present in your body. And taking some time to just appreciate everything that goes on in your body. It's all working for your highest and greatest good. And that every single moment of every single day, that your body, your cells are regenerating. Your body's always in a state of healing. That's its natural state. And isn't it so wonderful that we don't even have to think about it or do anything? Your body is on your side, even if it might not feel like it sometimes, it really is. And all your cells are working, regenerating and rebuilding and healing. And so taking some time to give yourself compassion for everything that you've gone through, for all of the trial and error, and acknowledging that you have done so many things right and that you continue to do so many things right, and that there is so much that is good and right about you. There truly, truly is. You're growth oriented. That's huge. You're motivated to make your life better. That's powerful. You're compassionate. You're empathetic. You're dedicated to treating yourself with value. You're curious. You're a lifelong learner. So many things that are good and right about you. And while the world can be an unpredictable place at times, that you are your own safe place. You're getting so much more in tune with what's nourishing for you and what's draining for you. You're learning how to reconnect with your boundaries and realize that it's okay to say no and to put limits, and to realize that it's important to have um, nourishing people in your inner circle, and that being treated with dignity and respect isn't something that you need to earn. It's just these are basic human rights, that you are likable, that you are lovable, that you are worthy of being treated with dignity and respect. And there are so many things that are right about you. And now visualize giving yourself a really big hug. And being that support that you've been wanting for so long or needing for so long. Just giving yourself a really big hug. Just letting yourself know, honey, you've been through a lot. You have. And you've done such a good job. You've come so far. There is so much that's good and right about you. And this next chapter in your life can be the best one yet. So when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Come on back. So thank you guys so much for being here. And yeah, I appreciate all of the wonderful questions. And oh, I'd love to hear more about that. Huffle Mom. She says, I built a bowl-shaped valley in my mind that I'd love to bring you to sometime for a guided meditation. Well, that just sounds delightful. I would love to hear all about that. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of kind of creating that comfortable place or that peaceful place, and whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's real, maybe it's fantasy, maybe it's a blend of both, but creating a place where you feel peaceful. Absolutely. Oh, Ember says, mighty, mighty gratitude, sister. Big hug back to you. Oh, well, thank you. And Bonnie says, I love these meditations. Thank you, Dana. Thank you guys for this suggestion. I know I'd gotten away from them up for a while, but it really is a nice way to end, and I think it's important that we end on a high note. So I really appreciate the suggestion. So, okay, guys, take care. I'll see you next week. And as always, you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and lots of love. Good night.